The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right, folks, we're just going to give everybody another minute or so to join into the session. We're going to get started in about 1 minute. All right, looks like we're just about at 4 o'clock. I am going to get going. I'd like to welcome everybody. My name is Faulkner, and I'm the online event coordinator for Staff Development for Educators. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today for Sustained PD Training, a flipped webinar on fostering long-lasting positive change in your school with Mike Shackleford. Before we do start, there are a few things you should know. To allow for Mike to be heard clearly, we do place all of our attendees on mute. And please use the window on the right-hand side of your screen to submit any questions throughout the webinar. And these will be used through the webinar, and also if we have a load of them, we'll get to those at the end of the webinar as well. The session is being recorded, and assuming no technical difficulties, and we are usually pretty lucky, you'll get a link to the archive about 48 hours after the live presentation, and there will also be in there a certificate of, or a link to a certificate of participation as well. And at the end of today's presentation, you will receive a short survey, and by completing that, you really do help us out in providing future complimentary webinars as well. Now, a little bit about SDE. At SDE, we believe educators have the most important job in the world, and it's why it's our mission to empower pre-K through 12 educators across the country with sustained professional development solutions that are not only research-based and rigorous, but also practical, innovative, and fun. Our goal is to help you create environments that prepare your students for the evolving demands of the 21st century. Together, we can create extraordinary classrooms. We're pleased to have Mike Shackleford joining us for today's webinar. Mike is an experienced classroom teacher, administrator, curriculum designer, educational consultant, conference presenter, this is quite a bio, Mike, and university-level guest speaker. His research centers on problem-based learning, specializing in the application of differentiated instruction practices, as well as the characteristics of effective schools, teachers, and instructional strategies, all of which aligns quite nicely with his doctorate in administrative leadership. Welcome, Mike. At this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over to you and drop myself off the camera.
All right. Thank you, Faulkner, and I do welcome all of you to this session. And just to briefly tell just a little bit, that sounds pretty impressive what Faulkner read, but I do want you to know that I've been a classroom teacher. I was a middle school teacher for 9 years, administrator for 11 years. And then I've been had my own consulting for about 15 years, and now I teach graduate school at Union University full-time, and but I still have my consulting that I'm doing on the side. I also work extensively in the United Arab Emirates, training principals and vice principals, as well as a project in Shanghai, China. Just kind of giving you a little bit of a background, and I also have a wife who teaches kindergarten, 28 years, and she has my full appreciation for what she can do. And but I am glad you're here, and to talk about this idea about long-term sustained training. This is something that I'm very passionate about, that I've spent a lot of time refining the process of sustained training. One of the things that I hope you were able to see prior to joining the session, I know this is a little different if you've done other webinars with SDE, is that a lot of times there's all this teaching, and then we do the question and answer. Well, I wanted to do it a little differently, and so hopefully you were able to see the 15-minute piece that I discussed a little bit about characteristics and benefits of long-term sustained training. I also hope you were able to see the other clip that was provided by a turnaround principal in Schenectady, New York, where she shared about her experience in working doing long-term sustained training. I was there at their high school for 3 years and had created these what we call core groups and to really help try to turn this school around. But this is a model that I actually developed probably a little over 15 years ago, and have seen it with some tremendous success and meaningful and professional development, rather than the one-shot training that, at least for me as a teacher and oftentimes even as an administrator, I received these one-shot, one-day, check it off the box type of thing. And it's not to say that you can't pick up an idea from that, but if you're really looking for systemic deep learning and to really move the strategies into the fabric and the culture of an organization, that's not going to happen in one-day events. And so thus where I came about with this particular model. I also hope that you were able to take the self-assessment. If you weren't, it's okay. You can pull down that slide off of the website. And but we're going to look just briefly at these questions. And the first one, because you may be asking, why should I even care about this? Why should I be thinking about long-term sustained training? Well, first of all, I think we have to go back and say, well, what are we currently doing? Do you find that the benefits and the usability, and that you see the application and transfer into the classroom? Is it meaningful and purposeful in your professional development? So, you know, how do we go about doing what we currently do, and is it meeting our needs? The second question deals with how to identify your current plans, and how did you go about figuring that out? Faulkner, if you could go ahead and move that to the next slide to question 2. And so what did you base it on? You know, did we get information from a variety of audiences, or did we happen to get a brochure in the mail, or, you know, and then how do we also go about measuring the success of our professional development? To be really honest, I've seen those where it really is. It was just to check off the list that we had our PD maybe at the beginning of the year, maybe we have one on during the mid-year, and then maybe one at the end. And so I think we really have to ask ourselves, you know, what influenced our decisions perhaps to do it that way, or maybe you are doing a hybrid version of some sustained training. And then finally, will your current PD plans allow you to make a difference? This is question 3 of the self-assessment. Is it making a difference in the classroom? Let me just say that for me, the bottom line is the children. I work with teachers, I work with administrators, and I enjoy doing that, but the absolute bottom line for me is the students. Are they receiving the benefit of everything that we can do to prepare ourselves as professionals so that when we walk into the classroom, we're well prepared? And that comes down to, do I have an effective lesson plan design, and do I have effective implementation of that lesson plan? Do I really focus on the assessments that I'm going to be using in the classroom? Are they providing me the kind of information that I need so I can make great instructional decisions? Assessment is something that I like to spend a lot of time on. Actually, I was just up in Boston this past week and talking about this whole assessment issue, which I think is the linchpin for much of what we're trying to do in schools today. But it's amazing for me, and I have to admit, as a teacher, I don't think I did it correctly. To come about and really use it to benefit students, but also to impact our instruction. And then finally, the instructional side. Are we using instructional strategies that steep the kids down in the material so that when they come up out of it and those activities, and it has to be engagement, because there's a huge difference between being engaged and being busy. And that's really an interesting thing for you to think about. I know in this particular format this may be difficult. I don't know if you've got somebody sitting around near you, or you may be alone and watching this, but something to think about and asking yourself the question, if I were to walk into a classroom, how would I know that the students are engaged versus being busy? Because if you step back and look in the window of a lot of school doors have that little window that you can look in. When you are on the outside in the hall looking in, engaged versus busy looks really identical. But it's not until you get into the classroom and you listen and you see what the students are working on that you begin to see the difference. And really one of those key differences is the engagement of the brain. And so this is something we'll talk a little bit about the brain in a few minutes, because I believe it has a direct impact on to the motivation of people for wanting to be involved in professional development. I'd like to ask first, we're going to do a little polling question. We're going to look at the question, it's how effective is your current plan of professional development at positively impacting classroom practices and student learning? So we're going to give you about 20-30 seconds. If you would look at those 4 choices and respond to that, and then we'll discuss the results in just a moment.
All right, we've got about 25% of people have voted so far. So the rest of you jump in there. I'll give you another 5 seconds or so. Okay. Oh, people are still doing it, so I'll give you a moment. All right, and let's take a look at that.
All right. Well, we seem to be that we see that it's effective at 64%, and that's very encouraging to know that it's being effective. The thing that we need to ask ourselves is, what are we basing the idea of effectiveness on? I'm not trying to dispute with you whether or not it's effective. You know best, but based on what criteria are we looking at to determine whether or not the professional development is having a real impact on the classroom? It does look like about 33% say that it's ineffective. Thank goodness there's nobody that's dismal. And so, but obviously I think that this is a way to pour into teachers, but also to pour into administrators. One of the things that I've enjoyed doing a great deal is providing professional development for administrators, because oftentimes, I don't know about you, but you can feel neglected at times. We're doing a lot sometimes for teachers, but sometimes we don't have poured into us and to really develop our particular skills. I'd like to just kind of go through just some key highlights, and we're going to run through these slides relatively quickly. But I just wanted to hit some key points. Long-term sustained training, I define that as 2 to 5 years of commitment to bringing that systemic change. Teachers complain the flavor of the month or the flavor of the year, and that oftentimes we won't take enough time to actually, it's that idea of the implementation dip. We bring in a new innovation, oftentimes there's a dip or some kind of roller coaster ride until it moves up, and then it becomes institutionalized. And generally between those 2 points of bringing it in and then institutionalize is 3 to 5 years. And so oftentimes we get to the bottom of that U-shape piece, and we cut it off and say, I told you it wouldn't work. And then so we bring something else in, but the same effect happens. And so we keep going through this cycle of bringing in new ideas, but we won't stick with something long enough to see the improvement and the gain that could actually come from that intervention. And so that's one of the reasons that I do, my definition of a long-term sustained training is 2 to 5 years. And I always say that I'm trying to do gradual release. I'm trying to slowly work myself out of a job of every district where I go and work. The very first place that I did this long-term training was in Northwest Pennsylvania, one of the coolest things that I've done in my career. I went for 100 days over 4 years, and to really bring a cultural change right down to the practices that happen in the classroom, but it was also a cultural change for the administrators. It was a cultural change for the teachers. But then the benefit came for the students. And in fact, I still exchange emails from some of these instructional coaches that I worked with all these years later. And so I began to really develop a personal relationship with these folks as well, which is one of the benefits of long-term sustained training, is that there's a rapport that's built between myself or whoever it may be and the people that I'm working with. Oftentimes I generally start with 1 or 2 what I call core groups or cohorts, and with that group I'll normally work generally about 5 to 6 days during that year, and then the next year we may have 2 or 3 days of training, and then the third year we go to 1, while all that time in the second year I'm starting new core groups. So it's this kind of evolution. The idea is to build the capacity within the staff, either at a school or staffs from district schools, so that there finally is enough capacity that I can begin to back away, and again that gradual release, that I can now release it and completely turn it over to the folks in the school or to the district, and then I fade away. And so that's ultimately the goal of long-term sustained training. And again, this could be any topic. I think probably one of the most popular these days is really talking about best practices, which differentiation is a best practice. And that for me involves things of learning environment, curriculum assessment, and instruction, and then oftentimes an overarching piece of leadership, which goes both for administrators and for teachers. That many teachers have leadership roles that may not have titles, but we as administrators couldn't do without those teachers in our building. So that's kind of an initial idea of kind of where I'm coming from on this long-term sustained training. A couple of things that we do need to just kind of admit, and if you remember back from the video that you hopefully got to watch, of me explaining some of this, is that we first have to admit that we need change. Sometimes it's, we have to be able to confront the brutal facts. I think you see that in like Good to Great. They talk about that you have to just be honest and admit the brutal facts, and that there are some things that maybe we could do differently and how we could use our limited resources. I'll be the first one to say that it is obviously a financial investment into the teachers and into the district and into the students. There's a commitment of time for teachers to be able to get together. And one thing that I will say that I think has been some of the most successful, and the feedback that I receive from projects, I have 5 or 6 of them going across the U.S. right now, is that I give teachers the latitude and the space to be able to learn. I don't do a train the trainer type of model, because for those folks, they need to be able to go out to their classroom and try this and make mistakes. And some of the best ways to share those practices are a teacher walks by and sees somebody that's been in the training and sees something to do, and at lunchtime they go, I noticed when I was walking by your classroom there was something you were doing. Could you tell me something about that? And that's the way to begin to help it begin to seep out, which also begins to identify people who are wanting to come to the next training, the next time that we have a new cohort start. So finding that the time, the money, there is an element of effort that has to go into this, and obviously by having the support of the administrators, because normally I'll ask for a team of teachers either from grade levels or from schools. They have to have an administrator present with them because it's important for the administrator to know what's being shared and what we're asking those teachers to go back into their classrooms to do. So that's one of the first things is just kind of having an honest self-assessment of where we currently are. Faulkner, you can go ahead and, move to the next one. Find out what you're strong at and what your needs are. And find out, and again, whether it's me or it doesn't matter to me, but to be able to stick with somebody that has the skills to relate to folks. Let me go back to the first district that I work with. I actually didn't know that the first 2 days that I was going in, I was trying out. They told me later that's what was happening, but they had some other people come in and it just wasn't going well. They were working on differentiation, and I guess my approach and personality meshed with them, and so I spent 98 more days there over the 4 years. So you've got to find what your strengths are, what your areas of need, and then find that right person to come in that can help you in those areas to foster those strengths, but also come in and help build capacity in those areas of need. In the next area, talking about, again, the commitment. I guess I can't say enough about that. I kind of touched on it, but there is that commitment of personnel, of substitutes, of the time, but the importance of the follow-through. And I tell you what, it means the world to people to see that we're willing to stick with something and that we're going to see it through. The impacts. I do hope you go back and see Peg Normanden's clip. It's about 7 or 8 minutes from Schenectady High School. I know I'm talking to you, but it's awesome to be able to hear from somebody who's actually been through this experience, and to hear the blessings that came from this work together. And a group of teachers who cared so deeply about their students, and to begin to really build capacity. And I can't tell you that everybody was thrilled to death. I had those naysayers in some of my sessions, but I also take that as a personal challenge, and to see if that I can help bring them into the light, and to begin to see the key elements that go into this idea of sustain. I've really seen some amazing examples of that, but ultimately, you know who it benefits. It benefits the students. And then again, everything that I do in my workshops, I practice what you ought to be doing in the classroom. I do it here at the university. Everything, whether it be from an agenda, I actually have an agenda here in front of me on my board. I want you to know I really do these things. I mean, I have an agenda here, and I didn't have that able to do it up there for you, but to be able to go through and kind of talk about the examples of brain-friendly strategies, such as having an agenda, because there are kids who walk in our classes and go, what are we doing today? What do they want to know? What are we doing today? And just having something as simple as having an agenda as a brain-friendly strategy, because all of us, I know for myself, I like to check things off my to-do list as they happen, and I get almost giddy as I start marking them out. And so kids from a brain standpoint want to see that we're making progress, that we're moving forward. So I want you to know that I think that's a critical part, is that we must model in the training exactly what should be happening in the classroom, and that's something that I can guarantee you I do in my practice, and that would be important as you start looking for someone, if you are interested in sustained training, that you find someone that really practices what they preach. The benefits, again, teachers are some of the most hardest working people that I know, and but we want to not only be hardworking, because one of the things that I say is generally oftentimes who leaves school tired? Well, generally it's the teachers. They get out to their car and they go, "Thank you, Lord, for getting me through another day." And then what do you see as the kids are coming out of the building? They're hooping and hollering. And I have a problem with that. I would actually like to think that kids walk out of our schools, if not physically exhausted, they're mentally tapped, and that they know that they've been to school that day. And so I want to produce better thinkers, both as teachers and as administrators, that we're thinking smart, but also for our students. And again, that's the bottom line for me. And so, I don't know, I think I've done that one. I'm going to keep moving. Long-term state results. I know you're hearing me and you're going, "Well, Mike, this all sounds good," but I want you to know that I have personally witnessed this with probably 24, maybe a few over that, maybe 36 districts and schools where I've worked, that I have seen the power of sustained training and the benefit, the excitement that comes for teachers that, one, they have some things confirmed that they're already doing some right things, which of course they are, but also taking on some new perspectives, some things that maybe they haven't considered in the past, and also for administrators to see the joy that comes as success starts happening. I mean, we all have to play the game of the test, but ultimately the idea is that we want to build capacity within our students long after the tests are gone. What are those things that kids need to know deeply and well? And those are things like problem solving and critical thinking and effective oral and written communication, and take all those Bloom's level words. I mean, I think for my own two personal children, they're out of high school now and graduated from college, but I would give anything for my kids to have been truly masters of Bloom's taxonomy words, and they're developing those skills now as adults. But those are some of those things that I would really like us to focus on. Your homework, I do want you to go back, and the sheet that you can pull down off of the website of these 3 questions. What are your current PD plans? How did you identify your current PD plans, and what do you want your PD, what do you want it to make a difference in? Faulkner, if you wouldn't mind, pull up the second question about how professional development is selected in the school, and we're going to do a second polling question here. I'd kind of just like to get some thoughts here. If you'd take a moment and just vote there. How is professional development selected in your school or district?
Hey, Mike, I'm going to give everybody about another 5 seconds here.
Okay.
So jump in there. Any of you stragglers? Okay. Looks like we've got pretty much everybody. I'm going to close that one up and share the results out.
Okay, so we have a little spread here. So obviously for teacher needs, a great way of identifying that is, based on your walkthroughs and evaluations and the developmental plans that you may be creating. And then we've got about a third that are leader determined, and if you combine the leadership team decision together, so you've got about 61%, so that's very encouraging, and then some where the teachers vote, and then we've got some no idea of how they're actually selected, and sometimes I wondered that myself. I didn't know how that was determined, but I went. So, kind of a combination there of looking at how folks do that. Let's look at the third polling question real quickly. I'm going to get you right in there with another polling question. Why are professional development days included in the school calendar? This might seem like a strange question, but this goes a lot to, it would be interesting to see how teachers might and unfortunately we can't do the difference with our audience right now of how administrators may answer this question versus teachers answering this question. But why are professional development days included in the school calendar? So make one of your choices there.
All right, looks like about the majority have voted, so I'm going to give you another 5 seconds or so. All right.
Great. Obviously, we're at 50% that it's, there is the requirement, and of course we have that. We do have to fill our contractual requirements, and but I'm sure there's probably an element where you could pick more than one on here. We would probably have even more want to say it's an opportunity to grow. And I think because I suffered through PD, both as a teacher and as administrator, I think I always try to make sure I do the very opposite of that, to make that it is an opportunity for people to be able to grow and to I've always said the more I learn, the more I find out I don't know, and I've realized there's a whole world out there I don't know about. And which, if you notice sometimes behind me on the picture, as you look at me, I have a fairly extensive library back behind me. There's a whole other shelf over here on the other side, and but this is a little bit of selection of my my library that I draw from and try to do some of the most recent things. We have some questions that are coming in, and one of the questions that was asked, we've used a PLC framework in our district for years. How might a long-term plan be supported in our PLCs? Well, that's a great question. And for there, I think one of the things with professional learning communities, and again, that's a whole topic that could be discussed right there, of how we use PLCs, because I hear a lot of different opinions how PLCs are going in people's schools and districts, that for some of them they're just moaning and whining sessions, and you're just as mad when you come out as you were when you in, or maybe even madder. But other ones are very effective. And so to put the PLC structure into place is when we go back from these core group meetings, from the sustained training, we can come back. For example, one of the things that I talk about in assessment is I have an 8-question reflective piece where 2 people get together and they interview each other. They bring an assessment to the training, and they take these 8 questions and they interview the other person about the assessment. And I've had people say, I have never stopped to really think this hard about what do I assess, why I assess it, what I hope to get from the assessment, and what impact is it going to have. And so they do that for each other, and then they give that feedback. And some of, from a brain reason, is that it forces that person that brought that assessment to verbalize and have to actually talk about it, because we don't generally do that. We take it to the copier and we run it off, but we don't really stop to think, why am I assessing with this? Is it really giving me the information I need to be able to make a powerful difference in the classroom. And so what I'm saying is you could take that 8-question sheet back to your PLC. Even though they're not in the training, you could go back and take that 8-question sheet and do that in a PLC meeting, and that might be based on a subject area. It could be a grade level. It could just be an interest team. But they go back and they bring, could you imagine what would happen if teachers started doing things like that and really looking at lessons and looking at assessments and having, you know, maybe 4 to 6 times a year it's your turn and you give a copy of the assessment or a copy of your unit to everybody, and then in a few days you meet and you get constructive feedback how that would improve our practice. Those are the kind of things in a sustained training that we can help introduce those ideas and then take them back to your PLC, and then it just becomes interlaced like in a network within the building to make that kind of powerful change. So again, here are the 3 questions that we started with at the very beginning. What are your current plans? And the second one, how did you identify, you know, what kind of factors, what kind of data did you use, and how will you measure that success? And then question 3 is, will your current plans allow you to really powerfully and specifically influence what happens in the classroom? Because if, you know, I will say, I've always said in the classroom, if what we teach students on the classroom only works inside the classroom, we have a serious problem. Well, if what I were to teach you in a PD only works within the 4 walls, you have a serious problem with me, and I should have a serious problem, is that it needs to be able to be taken out and used. And so so there's how I began to measure success, is if it moves out and starts to have these tentacles that start moving out into other areas within the school or within the district, and then ultimately benefiting the students. I had one other question. It says differentiated instruction has been an initiative in our school or our school district for a couple of years. We need assistance in knowing that our teachers are using the right strategies that will make an impact in their teaching and student learning. Would you recommend that we come and do walkthroughs with our staff before we go through with additional training? Well, I actually build that in. I can't require it of people, but I try to build that into my long-term sustained trainings, is that I like to go into the schools to have the context of the buildings and where those teachers are, that get a read and a feel on the building, so that when I'm actually working with the staff in the cohort model, or the core group model, then I have some context to draw upon of what we're dealing with. Sometimes it's not always possible at the beginning, but we try to do that during the course of that first year, of have some days of walkthroughs, which actually for a lot of administrators, I just got through doing 4 days of this down in Georgia, is we were talking about inter-rater reliability. And because some of the issues that teachers were saying is, we've got one administrator coming in saying one thing and another administrator coming in and saying something different, and I don't know who I'm supposed to make happy. And it shouldn't be who we're trying to make happy. It should be just we're making an assessment of the practices in the classroom. And so we went around, and it was a very powerful, and these 8 schools that we went through with the administrative teams. And so doing the walkthroughs, knowing the context, knowing how teachers are being evaluated by their administrators, it gives me a lot of context to positively influence what I do within the sessions, the workshops. And I have very specific activities that we do within the workshop to help facilitate and pull those pieces off. For example, I'll collect a series of questions, and I use those to help drive future sessions to make sure that I'm hitting even those specific needs of the participants. Faulkner, do you have any questions that
Yeah,
are
actually,
coming up?
I do have some, and I've actually got a follow-up to something you were speaking about before. An attendee says he's been a part of a lot of different PD initiatives, and like you mentioned, finds that people become pessimistic during the implementation dip, and was wondering how you recommend pushing through that and staying focused on the long-term goal.
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually worked in a district where I could not use they said, look, do us a favor, don't use the word initiative. We have been initiatived to death. And the only problem is I was a new person coming in to do something new. And what I had to do was actually to build the trust. And to believe it or not, it took them, they learned a lot during those first 2 core groups that we did that first year. But you know what was the proof is when I came back the next year. They didn't go, well, you know, he's gone. Now what are we going to do? Unfortunately, it took that, and they saw, well, he's actually back. And we're continuing with the same group of people, but we've started 2 new core groups in the second year. And so then it started, and they started feeding off of each other. And so I really worked to get the cohorts to start working together. And I could tell you some incredible things that came from that. I don't have that time, but I just want you to know that that synergy started building. And unfortunately, for a lot of people that are so jaded already, the proof has to be in that the person that we continue with the same efforts, that we are going to see it through, and we're not going to just do this 1-year deal or 1-month deal, but especially the 1-year deal, cut it loose and then bring something else in. And so that's the best answer I can give you. It's just having to build that trust and rapport with people, and then people seeing that the district is putting importance in it. And again, those are the kind of conversations that I have with the leadership in districts, and we have some very frank discussions at times to help for them to know how important it is for other people to see that you're putting some real credence in what we're doing, and then that helps begin to build more trust.
Thanks, Mike.
Did you have another one?
I do have a few more here that have come in. One question, how can teachers share ideas they get from trainings and conferences in a meaningful but non-threatening way with other staff members?
Right, that's a great question. And you know, one of the things that I think is powerful is that the teachers that are in the trainings, that as they're trying things in their individual schools, is other teachers begin to hear things, see things, and they ask questions. And so in a very non-threatening way, from a peer to a peer, they begin to share those pieces with them, and then they start trying those practices. So, you know, it's this kind of building, growing process that begins to happen. I think that's one of the most successful ways to make it happen, and it reduces the threat level for many teachers.
All right, and also just I did want to encourage anybody who did have any follow-up questions or questions for Mike. If we aren't able to get to questions during the webinar, I'm going to send Mike home with some homework or for his next plane ride or wherever he is, and send along the questions that we're not able to get to so that we can actually answer those following the live webinar as well. So feel free to submit those.
Hey, can you do one thing, Faulkner?
Absolutely.
Would you put that last polling question up?
Will do.
It says, if meaningful, purposefully planned, and targeted PD was provided on a continuous basis, how would you judge its effectiveness?
All right, I'm going to give everybody about another 10 seconds here. All right. Going, going, gone. All right. Let's take a look here.
Yeah, and yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, ultimately you hope that each one of those things will be a part of. But, you know, to be able to have an impact on the classroom, of course it's got to make me reflect and stop and think, you know, because how many times do we just sometimes not have that kind of time? And that's one thing that I get positive comments is, one, we get time to share, but we get time to stop and kind of think about and reflect on what we do. And then to have some tools that I can take back with me. And I always tell folks, because I'll have people say, I've got so many things I'm going to go back and do in my classroom differently. And I go, please don't. Don't. Just pick one or two things and go back and do those well, and then you can add some others. And so I would agree. I think each one of those have real validity. So again, I really do appreciate you joining me on this. And again, sustained training can apply to any topic. But those things that we need to see through, that we're looking for systemic change that will impact classrooms, which ultimately will impact students. That's the bottom line. Faulkner, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thanks, Mike. I hope everybody enjoyed Mike's discussion, and if you haven't had a chance to view the video, kind of your pre-homework, I would encourage you to go back and do that. And also, Mike, the school that you were at, the video that's on there as well, kind of the testimonial about sustained training. Which school was that located?
That was Schenectady High School in Schenectady, New York.
And that's on the page along with the webinar link on SDE.com, and you can actually go to SDE.com/webinars to access any of the current, future, or archived webinars as well. I do want to thank everybody for attending today, and along those lines, sorry, I'm not used to manning the full booth here. We do want to offer you a 10% discount for joining us today, both on training, on-site training, but also for our conferences and events. If you use the code W110614, that'll actually get you a 10% savings off of either something in your school and bringing a presenter on site, or one of our public events like our national conferences. And just mention that code. The phone number is 877-388-2054, and we'll get you set up with that. You know, you might want to speak with somebody about bringing Mike or somebody like Mike to your school for exactly this type of thing. And I would really recommend give us a call and have this in front of you so that we can actually run through those questions and see if the sustained training model would work for your school. I find it difficult to believe there's any that it wouldn't work in, but you know, there might be some that are better suited, or the timing might be right, something like that. And certainly give us a shout. There's no cost to have someone go through what your needs are and all that. I do want to also make you aware, Mike is actually going to be in Atlanta at the EdExpo Leadership Institute, February 22nd through 23rd, and we'd actually like to offer you a special discount for that. That's a 20% discount off registration if you use that EDX010 code. Again, that's EDX010, and really that Expo is designed to provide administrators, principals, and curriculum directors a combination of training and information and resources, all put up into one conference. Again, that's in Atlanta, February 22nd through 23rd. It's a brand new event. And if you go online, or actually if you give us a call at that 800 number, that 877 number, we can use that code EDX010 and get you there at a savings. I do want to remind everybody. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
I just wanted to say again how much I appreciate how hard, I know most of you are probably administrators out there, some of you are teachers, but how hard you work and what you do for the students. And It's not easy, and I want you to know how much I do appreciate what you do.
Thanks, Mike. I would like to remind everybody, following this again, 2 days after the live event, you'll get a follow-up email that'll have a link to the archive. If you'd like to view it again, share it with colleagues. Just watch Mike over and over and over again. And we'll let you know that when that's up, when that archive is up, also on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest. We're all over the place. Look for us under SDE for Educators, and that's using the number 4. You'll also receive an email that has a link to a printable certificate of participation for the webinar, so you can get an hour, some credit for your time, and again, a link to the archived recording of the webinar. Everybody, we are running short on time now, and I do want to thank everybody. If the questions we didn't get to, I know there's a few in there, and like I said, I'm going to send those along to Mike, and we'll have those posted along with the archive as quickly as possible. Just want to thank everybody for being us. Thanks, Mike, for joining us. I hope everybody enjoyed today's presentation, and everybody has a great rest of the day. Give us a shout at that 877 number, and let's go through that assessment with you and see what we can do to really improve the training in the PD that's being held in your school or district. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everybody.
You bet.
Bye-bye.
See you guys. Bye.